All right. Well, today it's time for the readings already, and today's reading comes from Richard Rohr's Falling Upward. He writes, people in the evolved stage of life are not preoccupied with collecting more goods and services. Quite simply, their desire and effort every day is to give back to the world a bit of what they have received. They now realize that they have been graciously given too, from the universe, from society, and from God. They try now to live simply so that others can simply live. Erik Erikson calls this someone as a generative person, someone who is eager and able to generate life from his or her own abundance and for the benefit of following generations. Because such people have built a good container, they are able to contain more and more truth, more and more neighbors, more and more broader a vision, more and more of a mysterious and outpouring God. In the second half, we do not have strong and final opinions about everything, every event, or most people, as much as we allow things and people to delight us, sadden us, and truly influence us. We no longer need to change or adjust to other people to be happy ourselves. We have moved from doing to being to an utterly new kind of doing that flows almost organically, quietly, and by osmosis. Our actions are less compulsive. We do what we are called to do and then let go of all consequences. It's true that in this second half of life, certainty, a kind of weight to carry, but no other way of being makes sense or gives us the deep satisfaction our soul demands and enjoys. Our life and our delivery system are now one, whereas before our life and our occupation seemed two different things. Our concern is not so much to have what we love anymore, but to love what we have right now. God's goal is always union, which is very different from any private perfection, which is merely a goal of the small ego. Our carefully constructed ego container must gradually crack open as we realize that we are separate from the universe, from others, or from our true selves. We see that we have an eternal soul. Our ego slowly learns to become the servant of the soul instead of its master. In place of the story for all ages today, because we don't have any little guys that I see. Maybe they're hiding. One of my favorite parts of a service as a child was what we called the passing of the peace, but it's simply a time to greet one another. So I thought maybe we could stand up and just greet one another and share that generative spirit, that energy between us, because that's where the true heart of fellowship is. And yeah, the bliss of our worship service today. So stand up, greet your neighbor. You can do it with a hug, a handshake, anything you feel obliged. I got forgotten last time, and I was like, I spent my whole time going like this. Oh my gosh. All right, you guys. I know everybody wants to keep going. He's like, don't start the sermon, Ryan. Nobody wants the sermon. But do y'all feel how just that experience of being with one another and sharing generated this amazing energy? Like who feels more energized now? It is, and that's exactly what Richard Rohr was talking about. This generative phase of life is one where, yeah, we give and we receive and we just become this one with all that surround us. So thank you guys for humoring me on that. That was absolutely lovely. And I'm sorry, but now we'll go into the sermon. All right. There once was a hapless hobo named Corey who lived most of his life rummaging through the dumpsters and sleeping on the streets surrounding the San Diego harbor. He was a respectable man whose ethics shattered the stereotypes and stigmas ascribed to others of a similar socioeconomic situation. A man that had little, but was gracious for what he did possess and willing to give of it. Corey refused to panhandle, so he made his humble living shining the shoes of wealthy cruise ship travelers as they came and went from their ships. Day in and day out, Corey would listen attentively to the stories of sea voyagers whom he knelt before, tales of exotic trips spanning the Pacific from Tahiti to Fiji. He wasn't bitter, despite his condition. Instead, he spent his energy dreaming for the day when he could see the parts of the world that he'd only heard about. So he started saving. A George Washington here, the likeness of Lincoln there. Some days were more prosperous than others, until finally, one fateful day, Corey had stashed enough cash to get him aboard a South Pacific sailing. How exciting. So he bought a ticket to paradise, and with the extra money stocked up on some stowable snacks and a few new outfits or a new day, so that he would not stand out amidst the more affluent crowd. And join Corey for a second. Take a deep breath in and feel the sea breeze on your skin. Listen for the seagulls as they soar through the clouds that float above the Pacific and taste the salt in the air. Embody the excitement of an adventure. Doesn't it feel good to be excited? You can open your eyes. Yes, Corey had finally achieved his goal and was ready to embark on a life-changing journey. Every morning of the voyage, he would wake up with life and an overflowing gratitude that he would finally experience and living. However, as the sun set on the day, he would reach his humble, windowless abode while the other more prosperous ventured out in their suave suits to sip cocktails and swing dance their way into the early hours. That was until one day, 2 weeks into a 3-week-long voyage, when a traveler, martini in hand, stopped him before he reached his door. Excuse me, you there? I'm curious. We see you every day on the island excursions and walking about the ship, but that you ever join our merrymaking in the evening? Oh, well, I love the days at sea, and I'm truly enjoying the world. Of shame suddenly snuck over Corey's face. But the truth is that I spent all my money on the ticket, so I don't have enough for the extravagant food and drinks on board. It's all right, though. I'm a fan of peanut butter and jelly, and I'm just simply thankful to be here on board with you. My friend, the man shuffled a little in reply. Don't you know that you purchased an all-inclusive ticket? The drinks and the dining are all part of the package. Needless to say, Corey spent his final week whining and dining and dancing until his stomach was full and his legs felt like lead. Oh, and iPads are not something I'm a fan of. Kind of funny. I just returned to a wedding I performed not long ago that I'm guessing you guys want to hear. I could actually. Does anybody want to get married?
Yeah, we're getting there. You got it. You got
All right. Rewind. That was kind of embarrassing. All right. Don't you know that you purchased an all-inclusive ticket? The drinks and dining are part of the package. Needless to say, Corey spent his final weeks whining, dining, and dancing until his stomach was full and his legs felt like lead. Abundance. It was a word and experience that the vagabond vacationer was unfamiliar with. The top shelf drinks, the endless buffets. However, because of the meager way he lived his life up to that point, he was able to truly appreciate the life that he got to taste that last week in a way others would never know, in true gratitude. True, we may not all see the local street corner shoe shiner as a spiritual role model. However, maybe there is something to learn from the life of our friend Corey. Richard Rohr alludes to this meager way of evolved living in his assertion that those in the generative or appreciative stage of life live simply so that others may simply live. They live meagerly and within their means so as to not be a burden, but a blessing on society. When we live simply, we are able to find gratitude in things that the rest of society takes for granted. However, that doesn't mean living a life of self-imposed poverty, shunning unnecessary or extravagant possessions, but living a life of detachment from the superficial so that you are able to share the blessings that you have been given with the world. And there's a lot to share, because that same all-inclusive that Corey purchased has been given to each and every one of us. The question is, have we, or how do we accept it? Yes, abundance. It's an endless Thanksgiving Day dinner, but that sounds so gluttonous, so sacrilegious. After all, didn't Jesus teach, blessed are the meek and poor in spirit? Didn't Buddha practice and promote a vow of poverty? Didn't Muhammad call for a life of scarcity? Traditionally, the life of the spiritual contemplative, Buddhist, Christian, Muslim, or Jew, is associated with simplicity, self-denial, and the pursuit of piety through self-impoverishment. A life defined by the Apostle Paul's spiritual tenets of fasting, almsgiving, and prayer, or more accurately, self-deprivation, self-expenditure, and our movement beyond the self. This is the same Paul who instructed the church in his letter to the Romans to rejoice in your sufferings. For suffering, he said, produces endurance. Endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And what do we want more than hope? That call to an impoverished perception of piety has remained steadfast throughout the millennia and across various faith traditions, and was recently reiterated by Pope St. Francis, who asked a group of Jesuit students upon their graduation, how can we become a little poorer in order to be like our poor teacher? Where can we find hope? He paused before answering his own question. In depravity, he finally declared, because poverty calls us to sow hope. The Buddhists were a step ahead of Francis, as they have been taking a vow of poverty for hundreds of years. However, that vow is largely misunderstood, and it's much better translated as a vow of simplicity in hope of ridding oneself of the burdens and complications of an overly lavish lifestyle. I reiterate Richard Rohr's statement that the evolved live simply so that others may simply live. Hope. It's a common theme across the spiritual spectrum, but I hate to say it ain't always abundant these days. It's hard to be hopeful or grateful when we turn on the news or open the paper in the morning. if that is, anyone still reads a simple paper version of the paper or watches simple cable TV. And hearing about the strains, struggles, and scarcity of others can make us feel guilty for our own perceived privilege. Why, we may wonder, do we have so much when others have so little? Why does one have a feast of fresh foods while another sits in a dumpster? Francis, Buddha, and Richard Rohr aside, the truth is that we have each been gifted this all-inclusive ticket, like it or not. Thus, maybe the question is not why some sunbathe on the ship while others squander on the shore, but why some choose to retreat to their rooms for a meal of stale bread and cheap wine while others choose to embrace the overflow. We go now to the Jewish prophet Isaiah, whose message of piety in the 55th chapter of his self-proclaimed book was one of plenty and not impoverishment. Ho, all who are thirsty, come to the waters. You who have no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Why spend money on that which is not bread and labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen to me and eat what is good, and you will delight in the richest of fare. That passage is unique in many ways, starting with its initial salutation. Ho, come, all who thirst. In biblical Hebrew, ho was a call to the dead during a funeral lament, an incentive to wake up. Yes, wake up, y'all. I've got good news. The cocktail-filled cruise ship is waiting and you have an all-inclusive ticket. But in order to enjoy abundance, we need to first believe in it. Moreover, believe that we have more than enough to share. And that starts by believing we are worthy to receive. Ho, all who thirst. Pay attention to that initial call. We must want abundance. We must be thirsty for life, passionate, desiring, not in a self-serving way, but in a way in which we want abundance for all and we're not afraid to be the bearer. I point in such to another popular verse associated with funerals, Psalm 23, where David declares, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." But that is a horrible mistranslation. For the original Hebrew, Adonai roi lo ashar, or I shall not need. We should always remain thirsty for life, wanting more, not for ourselves, but for the world of which we are a part. But simultaneously, we must remain grateful that we have everything that we need in order to live a full life. There's a huge difference between wanting and needing. In order to truly appreciate the gifts of life, we need to enter into what Richard Rohr referenced as an evolved life, a life of gratitude, a life when we are not a servant to our ego, the source of separation and scarcity, but instead its master. A life that we are not scared to share with others because we trust we have more than enough to give. A life where we expect nothing in return because the gift of giving is generative in itself. It's as Hafez once wrote, "The sun never asked the earth for an IOU. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole world." Now, I like to say, because like the sun, we too have an eternal and abundant light to share. However, as the popular parable proclaims, a candle does little to light the way when it's placed under a bushel basket. So maybe the question is whether you are illuminated, gifted, or enlightened, the giver. Is your faith passive or dynamic? Illumination is when someone shines a torch in your ear, whereas enlightenment is when you are the torch. Well, all that sounds great, right? But embracing the abundance and living a life of gratitude over guilt is not always easy, especially when we are made aware of the pains of the world, a foreign war, a natural disaster, another mass shooting, or the stains on the garments of the local homeless hobo sitting on the street corner. No, all too often when we look at the world around us, We are overcome with guilt for our gifts, of fear for what has been taken from us, instead of gratitude that they've been freely and abundantly given. In large part due to another of Rohr's teachings. Humans, Rohr alludes, don't suffer from original sin so much as they suffer from original shame. We suffer from guilt over gratitude, a feeling of unworthiness for our wealth. Oh, wake up, snap out of it though. The ship is in the harbor and it's time to step aboard. It's time to enter the generative phase of life, to leave your feelings and fears of inadequacy on the shore and enjoy the overflow. I turn in such response in the wisdom of Marianne Williamson, who expounds on this idea of fear of abundance. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous? There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the abundance that is within us. Not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people the permission to do the same, for so much as the moon reflects the sun. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. So fear, what is it that we are scared of? As an English major by design, I like to approach my fear of life via 3 acronyms. The first defines fear, F-E-A-R, as false evidence appearing real. Are you living a false story of scarcity, of shame? Or if so, how can you change your inner narrative to one of gracious grandeur instead of guilt? The answer is dependent on your choice between the other 2 acronyms. Fear, F-E-A-R, you can face your emotions and receive, as scary as facing our emotions, welcoming the abundance of the world may be. Or, and I'll save you the French, you can fudge everything and recede, denying your destiny and divinity out of a fear of what doors they may open. The answer is up to us. Fear or fortune, guilt or gratitude, scarcity or prosperity, appreciation or anxiety, receiving or receding, self-love or self-loathing. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's a little heretical to drop the prophetic F-bomb in worship. And you're right. My choice of wording is indeed heretical. It's understanding of heresy that is wrong. The word heretic, Epicuric in Greek, comes from the name of my favorite philosopher, Epicurus, and simply means to choose, pro-choice. How horribly heretical is that? Epicurus was known for his philosophy that the truest purpose in life is to seek pleasure in living, to choose abundance, you may say, and to share it without restraint in a way that is not merely transactional, but transformational. The ticket is yours. If you love yourself enough to accept it and love the world enough to share it. And I cannot tell you what that means in your own life. That is for you to contemplate and create. However, I can say that from my vantage point here, as I look out, I see an abundance of wisdom, of insight, of beauty, of emotion and devotion waiting to be released on the world. I see a whole lot of enlightenment, not merely illumination. In such, I close with a simple thanksgiving. Thank you for being here, and I encourage everyone to have the courage to choose hope, prosperity, and happiness in all that you do this upcoming season and well beyond.